You know that moment when you realize you've been played for 5 years straight? When the people you trusted most look you dead in the eye and destroy everything you sacrificed for? Yeah, that was Tuesday for me. My name is Vanessa, and I'm about to tell you how my own family tried to screw me over so badly that karma had to step in and teach them a lesson they'll never forget. It started 5 years ago when Dad got his diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 18 months, maybe 2 years if he was lucky. Mom called me first, her voice shaking through the phone. Vanessa, honey, we need to talk about your father. I was living in Portland then, had a decent marketing job, a small apartment I actually liked, and was finally dating someone who didn't make me want to throw things. A normal life for a 30 something woman. What's wrong? I asked, though I already knew from her tone that my world was about to flip upside down. He's sick, really sick. The doctors say, her voice cracked. Someone needs to be with him, full time. That someone, of course, was me. Not Aurora, my younger sister who lived 20 minutes away with her husband Carl and their 2 kids. Not Mom, who suddenly developed a convenient case of, I can't handle seeing him like this. No, it was me, the eldest daughter, the one who'd always been expected to fix everything. I can't just drop everything, Mom. I have a job, responsibilities. Vanessa. Her voice went cold. That tone I remembered from childhood when she'd made up her mind. This is your father we're talking about. Family comes first. The guilt trip worked, like it always did. Within 2 weeks, I'd quit my job, broken up with David, who, let's be honest, was probably relieved, and moved back into my childhood bedroom to become Dad's full time caregiver. Don't worry, sweetheart, Mom said as she helped me unpack. We know what you're giving up for us. The house will be yours when the time comes. It's only fair. Aurora nodded enthusiastically from the doorway, bouncing her youngest on her hip. Absolutely. You're doing so much for Dad. We could never repay you, but at least you'll have the house. The house. Our family home. A beautiful 3 bedroom colonial worth about $400,000. It wasn't just about the money, though God knows I'd need it after burning through my savings. It was about having something to show for the years I was about to lose. You promise? I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. Of course, Mom said, squeezing my hand. It's already decided. Those first months were hell. Dad was still mobile then, but the treatments left him weak and nauseous. I drove him to appointments, managed his medications, cleaned up when he couldn't make it to the bathroom in time. I watched him shrink from the strong man who'd taught me to ride a bike into someone who needed help buttoning his shirts. Aurora visited maybe once a week, usually with the kids in tow. She'd stay for an hour, take some photos for social media about spending precious time with Grandpa, then leave me to deal with the aftermath when Dad was too tired to even sit up. I wish I could do more, she'd say, adjusting her designer purse. But with the kids and Carl's work schedule, Mom was even worse. She'd show up for the good days when Dad was feeling well enough to sit on the porch or watch TV. The moment things got messy, literally or figuratively, she'd suddenly remember an appointment or a commitment. You're so much better at this than I am, she'd tell me. He needs you. The isolation was crushing. My friends in Portland stopped calling after a few months. My savings account dwindled as I paid for Dad's supplements, special foods, and the countless little things insurance didn't cover. I aged 5 years in the first 12 months alone. But I held on to that promise. The house. My reward for sacrificing everything. It was during Dad's third year of treatment on one of his rare good days when he grabbed my hand with surprising strength. Vanessa, he whispered, his eyes more focused than they'd been in weeks. I need to make this right. What you've done for me, it's not fair what they're asking of you. Dad, don't worry about. No. His grip tightened. I need to fix this before it's too late. He struggled to sit up, reaching for the drawer in his nightstand. His hands shook as he pulled out a manila folder I'd never seen before. What is this? I asked. He looked toward the door, then back at me, his voice barely audible. Insurance. For you. That's when I found the papers that would change everything. I should have known something was up when Aurora started visiting more often. Not to help with Dad, mind you, but to have these hushed conversations with Mom in the kitchen while I was busy giving him his medications or helping him to the bathroom. The first time I caught them whispering, they went silent the second I walked in. Just talking about the grocery list, Mom said, folding a piece of paper and shoving it into her purse. Need me to pick anything up? I asked. No, no. Aurora's got it covered. Right. Aurora, who hadn't bought groceries for this house in 3 years, suddenly had it covered. The conversations got more frequent. Aurora would show up around dinner time, when Dad was usually napping, and she and Mom would disappear into the den. I'd hear fragments through the thin walls. Not fair to Carl and the kids. She's getting free room and board. Think about Aurora's future. One evening, I was coming back from the pharmacy when I saw Carl's car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see all three of them, Mom, Aurora, and Carl, sitting around the table with papers spread out in front of them. I walked in through the back door, and they scrambled to cover everything up like teenagers hiding porn. Oh, Vanessa! Aurora jumped up, her face flushed. Carl was showing us some insurance stuff for his work. Carl nodded too enthusiastically. Yeah, boring financial planning stuff. You know how it is. I looked at the papers they were still trying to shuffle together. One had Dad's name at the top in bold letters. Is that something for Dad's care? I asked. No, no, Mom said quickly. Just some old documents Carl needed to see for reference. The lies were getting more elaborate and more obvious. A few days later, Aurora cornered me while I was doing laundry in the basement. Vanessa, we need to talk about the future. What about it? She perched on the edge of the washing machine, picking at her manicured nails. I mean, after Dad, you know, what are your plans? I haven't really thought that far ahead. I lied. Of course, I'd thought about it. I'd be getting the house, and I'd finally be able to rebuild my life. It's just that Carl and I have been talking, and with the kids getting older, we're going to need more space. Our apartment is getting really cramped. That's tough, I said, not looking up from folding Dad's shirts. The thing is, this house would be perfect for us. 4 bedrooms, that big backyard for the kids. I stopped folding. Aurora, Mom already promised me the house. We talked about this when I moved back. I know, I know. But that was before we really thought it through. I mean, you're single, no kids. You don't need all this space. And Carl's been looking at getting a promotion. But we'd need to show stability, you know? Having a house would really help with that. So you want me to just give up the one thing I was promised for 5 years of caregiving? It's not giving up. We'd work something out. Maybe you could stay in the guest room, help with the kids. I stared at her. You want me to become your live in babysitter after I've spent 5 years as Dad's nurse? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Aurora? She slid off the washing machine, her voice getting that whiny tone it always got when she wasn't getting her way. I just think you're being selfish. This family needs to stick together, and Carl and I have real responsibilities. Kids to think about. And I have nothing to think about? You've been living here rent free for years. Do you know how much money you've saved? Carl and I have been struggling to make ends meet while you've had it easy. Easy. 5 years of watching my father slowly die was easy. Get out, I said quietly. Vanessa, get out of the basement. Now. She huffed and stomped upstairs, but not before I heard her mutter, Mom's right. You've gotten really selfish since you moved back. That night, I was helping Dad with his evening medications when he grabbed my wrist. They came to see me today, he whispered. Who? Your mother and Aurora. They had papers. My blood went cold. What kind of papers? They want me to sign the house over to Aurora. Said it would be better for the family. His eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks. They said you agreed to it. I never agreed to anything like that. I know. He squeezed my hand. That's why I didn't sign. But they'll be back. Dad, the papers I showed you yesterday, in my nightstand, that's your protection, Vanessa. Don't let them know about it yet. 2 days later, I was coming back from Dad's doctor appointment when I saw Aurora's car in the driveway again. I parked and sat for a moment, trying to decide whether to go in through the front door or sneak around back. The decision was made for me when Aurora came bursting out the front door, practically skipping down the steps. She was on her phone, and her voice carried across the yard. Carl, it's done! Dad signed everything this morning. The house is ours. She saw me sitting in my car and had the decency to look embarrassed for about 2 seconds before her expression shifted to defiant. Vanessa, perfect timing. We need to talk. I got out of the car slowly, my hands shaking with rage. About what, Aurora? About your next steps, now that the paperwork's all settled. I pushed past Aurora and stormed into the house. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, looking way too pleased with herself. Vanessa, honey, sit down. We need to discuss. Where is he? I demanded. Your father's resting. The morning was very tiring for him. I headed straight for Dad's room. He was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. Dad? He turned his head slowly. I'm sorry, Vanessa. I'm so sorry. What happened? They wouldn't leave. Your mother kept saying it was for the best, that Aurora needed it more. They had Carl there too, talking about the grandchildren's future. His voice was barely a whisper. I was so tired. They kept pushing and pushing. I sat on the edge of his bed. Did you sign the papers? He nodded, tears starting to form in his eyes. But Vanessa, remember what I told you, the folder in my nightstand. That's still. Dad, what's in that folder? He struggled to sit up, and I helped him. A contract between you and me for your caregiving services. What kind of contract? I had my lawyer draw it up 6 months ago. Every hour you've worked, every expense you've covered, every sacrifice you've made, it's all documented. You're not just my daughter helping out. You're my employee, my caregiver, and I owe you. I stared at him. How much? Market rate for full time care, plus expenses. About $300,000. My mouth fell open. Dad? That's almost the entire value of the estate. I know. He gripped my hand. They can have the house, Vanessa, but they'll have to pay you first, and there won't be enough left to cover both. Why didn't you tell me about this before? Because I hoped they'd do the right thing. I thought maybe your mother would come to her senses. He coughed, the effort exhausting him. But when they came here today with those papers, demanding I sign, I knew they never intended to keep their promise to you. The bedroom door opened, and Mom walked in with Aurora right behind her. Thomas, you need to rest, Mom said. Vanessa, we need to talk. We're talking, I said, not moving from Dad's bedside. In the kitchen. Now. Dad squeezed my hand. Remember what I told you? I followed them to the kitchen where Carl was now sitting at the table, looking uncomfortable. Vanessa, Mom began, I know this is a lot to process, but we've made the decision that's best for everyone. Best for everyone? Or best for Aurora? The house will stay in the family, Aurora said. Carl and I will take good care of it, and you're welcome to visit any time. Visit? This has been my home for 5 years. You always knew this was temporary, Mom said. You came back to help your father, and you've done that beautifully, but now it's time to think about the future. What about my future? What about the promise you made me? Aurora rolled her eyes. You act like we're throwing you out on the street. You've been living here rent free for years. You should have enough saved up to get your own place. Saved up? I've spent every penny I had on Dad's care. That was your choice, Mom said coldly. Carl finally spoke up. Maybe we could help with a security deposit or something for an apartment. I looked at the three of them, sitting there like they were doing me a favor, like 5 years of my life meant nothing. You know what? You're right. I should have been thinking about my future. I stood up. And I have been. Good, Mom said. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Oh, I'm being very reasonable. In fact, I think it's time I made some phone calls. What kind of phone calls? Aurora asked. Well, first I need to call Dad's lawyer. There are some documents that need to be filed. The color drained from Mom's face. What documents? And then I need to call an estate attorney, someone who specializes in caregiver contracts. Vanessa, what are you talking about? Aurora's voice was getting higher. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up my phone. Did you know that when someone provides full time care for a family member, they can be legally compensated for their services? Especially when there's a written agreement? There's no agreement, Mom said quickly. Actually, there is. Dad and I signed it 6 months ago. Every hour I've worked, every expense I've covered, every sacrifice I've made, it's all documented and legally binding. Carl leaned forward. How much are we talking about? About $300,000. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. That's impossible, Aurora whispered. Is it? Let's see. 5 years of full time care at market rates, plus all the expenses I've covered out of pocket. Actually, 300 might be conservative. Mom's teacup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. Thomas wouldn't do that to us. He already did. The contract is signed, witnessed, and filed with his attorney. Aurora started crying. But the house can't be transferred until all debts are paid. And guess what? I'm now the estate's biggest creditor. I headed toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Aurora, you might want to call your landlord. Something tells me you're going to need that apartment for a while longer. Dad passed away 3 weeks later on a quiet Thursday morning. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, and for a moment the house was completely silent except for the sound of my own crying. Mom and Aurora arrived an hour after I called them. Aurora immediately started sobbing dramatically, throwing herself across Dad's bed like she'd been there all along. Mom just stood in the doorway, dry eyed and calculating. We need to call the funeral home, she said. I already did. They'll be here in an hour. Good. We have a lot to arrange. The funeral was a nightmare. Aurora played the grieving daughter perfectly, accepting condolences from relatives who had no idea what had been going on behind the scenes. She even had the nerve to give a eulogy about how much Dad meant to the family and how he'd want us all to stick together. I sat in the front row, watching her performance, wondering if she actually believed her own lies. After the service, Uncle Mike pulled me aside. Vanessa, I want you to know how much we all appreciate what you did for your father. 5 years of your life. That's real love. Thank you, Uncle Mike. Your mom mentioned you might be moving out soon. If you need any help with anything, I glanced over at Mom, who was watching us from across the room. Actually, there might be some complications with that. What kind of complications? Before I could answer, Aurora appeared at my elbow. Uncle Mike, thanks so much for coming. Dad would have been so happy to see everyone here. She linked her arm through mine in a show of sisterly solidarity that made my skin crawl. Vanessa and I were just talking about how we're going to keep Dad's memory alive in the house. Right, Vanessa? Were we? Her grip on my arm tightened. Of course, family is everything. The next morning, I was packing Dad's medications to return to the pharmacy when Aurora and Carl showed up with a U-Haul truck. What's that for? I asked. We're moving in this weekend, Aurora announced. No point in waiting around. Moving in where? Here. Our house now. Remember? She walked past me into the living room like she owned the place, which, technically, she did. Carl looked embarrassed as he followed her in. Vanessa, we really appreciate everything you've done. We know this is hard. Do you? We talked about it, and we want to give you 2 weeks to find a place. That's fair, right? I stared at him. 2 weeks? Well, we already gave our landlord notice, and the kids are excited about having their own rooms. Aurora came back from her tour of the house. Oh, and Vanessa, we're going to need to redecorate. This whole place screams old sick person, you know. We want it to feel like a real family home. This was Dad's home for 30 years. And now it's ours. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. I'm thinking we'll paint over that awful wallpaper in the dining room. Maybe knock out the wall between the kitchen and living room to make it more open concept. You want to tear down walls? It's our house, she said, not looking up from her phone. We can do whatever we want with it. That afternoon, Mom showed up with cleaning supplies and started going through Dad's belongings like she was preparing for a garage sale. Mom, what are you doing? Clearing out his room. Aurora and Carl will need the space. She was folding Dad's clothes into garbage bags. His favorite sweater, the one he wore every Sunday, went right into the donation pile. Don't you think we should take some time before. Time for what? He's gone, Vanessa. These are just things. I watched her pack away 30 years of Dad's life in 20 minutes. His books, his reading glasses, the little wooden box where he kept his cufflinks, everything went into bags and boxes like it had never mattered at all. There, she said, surveying the empty room. Much better. Aurora can set up the nursery in here. Nursery? Oh, didn't she tell you she's pregnant again? Due in the spring? Of course she was. Another grandchild to justify taking the house. That evening, I called Chelsea, the estate lawyer Dad had used. Chelsea, it's Vanessa. I need to file the caregiver contract. Are you sure you want to do this? Once I submit these documents, there's no going back. I looked around the house that was no longer mine, at the boxes of Dad's life stacked in the hallway, at Aurora's kids running through the rooms claiming their new bedrooms. I'm sure. Okay, I'll need you to come in tomorrow morning. Bring all your documentation, receipts, medical records, anything that shows the scope of care you provided. What happens next? I file a claim against the estate. Until that claim is satisfied, no assets can be transferred. The house sale is frozen. And if they can't pay, then the house gets sold to pay the debt. Your debt. I hung up and walked to the kitchen where Aurora was making dinner like she'd been cooking in this kitchen her whole life. Aurora, we need to talk. Can it wait? I'm trying to figure out this stove. No, it can't wait. She turned around, spatula in hand. What's so urgent? I filed a claim against Dad's estate today. The spatula clattered to the floor. The meeting at Chelsea's office was like watching a bomb go off in slow motion. Aurora and Carl sat on one side of the conference table, Mom on the other. I took the chair across from Chelsea, who had Dad's file spread out in front of her like evidence at a trial. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you for coming, Chelsea began. We're here to discuss the claim filed against Thomas's estate by Vanessa for caregiver services rendered. This is ridiculous, Mom snapped. She's his daughter. Daughters don't charge their fathers for care. Chelsea slid a document across the table. Actually, Mrs. Douglas, they do when there's a legal contract in place. This agreement was signed by Thomas 6 months before his death and properly witnessed. Aurora grabbed the paper, her hands shaking. $300,000? That's insane. Let me break it down for you, Chelsea said, opening another folder. Full time caregiving services at market rate. $40 per hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 5 years. That's approximately $730,000. Carl's face went white. 700,000? However, the contract specifies a reduced rate of $20 per hour, acknowledging the family relationship, plus documented expenses for medical supplies, special foods, transportation to appointments, and home modifications for accessibility. We never agreed to pay her anything, Aurora shouted. You didn't have to. Thomas did. Chelsea pulled out another document. Here's his signed statement acknowledging that Vanessa sacrificed her career and personal life to provide his care and that she should be compensated accordingly. Mom leaned forward. He wasn't in his right mind. The cancer, the medications. The contract was signed during a period when Thomas was fully competent, as verified by his doctor. I have the medical records right here. Aurora started crying. But we need that house. We have children. We're pregnant again. That's not the estate's concern, Chelsea said matter of factly. The law is clear. All debts must be satisfied before any assets can be distributed. So, what does that mean? Carl asked quietly. It means the house cannot be transferred to Aurora until Vanessa's claim is paid in full. The estate's total value is approximately $450,000. After funeral expenses and other debts, there's about 400,000 left. But that's barely enough to cover her ridiculous claim, Aurora shrieked. Actually, it's not enough. The claim is for $312,000, but there are also estate taxes, legal fees, and administrative costs. After everything is settled, there will be approximately $30,000 left. The silence in the room was deafening. 30,000? Mom whispered. That's not enough for a down payment on a studio apartment, Carl said. Aurora turned to me, her face twisted with rage. You planned this. You manipulated Dad when he was dying. I took care of him when no one else would. You lived here rent free for 5 years. I gave up my career, my savings, my entire life for 5 years. Girls, please, Mom started. No! Aurora slammed her hand on the table. She's destroying our family over money. You destroyed it the minute you decided to steal the house behind my back. We didn't steal anything. Dad signed it over to us. After you pressured him for months while I was too busy keeping him alive to notice. Chelsea cleared her throat. If I may, there are a few options here. The estate could take out a loan against the house to pay the claim, though given the amount, that's unlikely to be approved. Or or what? Mom asked. The house could be sold. The proceeds would pay Vanessa's claim first, then any remaining funds would go to Aurora as specified in the will. Sold? Aurora's voice cracked. But we already moved in. Our kids picked out their rooms. You moved in before the estate was settled, Chelsea said. That was premature. Carl put his head in his hands. We gave up our apartment. We have nowhere to go. That's not my problem, I said. Aurora whirled on me. How can you say that? We're family. Family? You mean like when you promised me the house for 5 years, then signed it away the second dad was weak enough to manipulate? We didn't manipulate anyone. Really? Because I have text messages. I pulled out my phone. Here's one from you to Carl. Dad's having a bad day. Perfect time to get him to sign. And another one. Vanessa's at the pharmacy. Come over now with the papers. Aurora's face went pale. How did you get those? Carl accidentally sent them to me instead of you. Wrong contact. Carl looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. There's more, I continued. Voice messages, emails, even a recording of you telling Mom that I was too stupid to know what was happening. You recorded us? Dad's baby monitor picks up conversations from the kitchen. Amazing what people say when they think no one's listening. Mom finally spoke, her voice ice cold. Vanessa, if you go through with this, you'll have nothing left. No family, no home, no one who cares about you. I already have nothing, Mom. You made sure of that. Chelsea shuffled her papers. I need a decision. Do you want to proceed with the claim? I looked at Aurora, still crying, at Carl staring at his hands, at Mom glaring at me like I was her worst enemy. File it! Vanessa, please, Aurora started. File it today. As we left the office, Aurora grabbed my arm in the parking lot. I'll fight this. I'll prove you coerced, Dad, that you took advantage of a sick old man. I pulled my arm free. Good luck with that. I mean it. I'll drag you through court, expose what you really are, a greedy, selfish. What I really am, I said quietly, is someone who kept her word. Unlike you. I got in my car and drove away, leaving them standing in the parking lot, their perfect plan crumbling around them. Within a week, Aurora and Carl were back in their old apartment. I know because Carl called me, practically begging. Vanessa, please, we had to break our lease to move into the house. Now we're paying double rent until we can find something else. That sounds rough. The kids are confused. They don't understand why they can't live in Grandpa's house anymore. Maybe you should have thought about that before you lied to them. We never lied. Carl, I have recordings. Do you want me to play them for your kids? He hung up. The family gossip network kicked into high gear. Aunt Linda called first. Vanessa, honey, I heard there's some trouble with your father's estate. Nothing I can't handle, Aunt Linda. Well, your cousin Beth mentioned that Aurora's been telling people you're trying to steal the house from her children. Is that what she's saying? She's also saying you manipulated your father when he was dying, that you took advantage of his illness. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Aunt Linda, did Aurora ever visit Dad when he was sick? Well, I'm sure she once a week, for an hour, usually with the kids, so she could take pictures for Facebook. Oh, did she ever change his sheets when he had an accident? Feed him when he was too weak to hold a spoon? Sit with him during chemo treatments? Silence. I did all of that for 5 years while Aurora was posting about what a devoted daughter she was. I had no idea. Most people don't, but now you do. By the end of the week, the family had split into camps. Uncle Mike and Aunt Linda were on my side. Cousin Beth was Team Aurora. Aunt Sarah was staying neutral, which meant she thought I was right but didn't want to deal with Mom's wrath. Mom, meanwhile, had declared war. She showed up at the house on Friday afternoon while I was packing Dad's books. I want you out. Today. The estate hasn't been settled. I'm still the caregiver on record. You're not a caregiver anymore. Your father is dead. But his affairs aren't settled. Until they are, I have legal right to remain in the house. She walked over to the bookshelf and started pulling out photo albums. These are family pictures. They belong to the family. I am family. No. She turned to face me, her eyes cold. You stopped being family the day you decided to destroy Aurora's future. I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to let you destroy mine. Aurora has children to think about, a baby on the way. You have nothing. I have nothing because I gave everything to take care of Dad. That was your choice. It was your manipulation. She slammed a photo album on the table. You want to know the truth, Vanessa? Your father felt guilty about you. He knew you'd wasted your life taking care of him instead of getting married and having children like a normal woman. The words hit like a slap. He never said that. He did, to me, many times. He worried that you'd become a bitter old maid with nothing to show for your life. You're lying. Am I? Why do you think he was so eager to sign the house over to Aurora? He wanted to make sure his legacy went to someone who'd actually done something with her life. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. He pitied you, Vanessa. We all did. That's when my phone rang. It was Remington, my best friend from high school. Rem, I can't talk right now. Vanessa? What the hell is going on? I just got a call from some woman claiming to be your sister asking me about your mental health. I looked at Mom, who was pretending to organize photos. What did she say? She wanted to know if you'd ever been hospitalized for depression, if you'd ever talked about hurting yourself or others. She said the family was worried about you. And what did you tell her? I told her to go to hell and hung up. But Vanessa, what is this about? I'll call you back. I hung up and turned to Mom. Aurora's calling my friends now? We're concerned about your mental state. This obsession with money, these delusions about being owed something. Get out. Vanessa, get out of this house right now. You can't throw me out. I'm your mother. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA. Get out. She gathered up the photo albums and headed for the door, then turned back. You know what your father's last words to me were? Take care of Aurora. She's the one who needs help. After she left, I sat in Dad's empty room and called Remington back. Rem, I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I told her everything. The 5 years of caregiving, the broken promises, the secret contract, the legal battle. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, Vanessa, your family is insane. They're saying I'm the crazy one. You're not crazy. You're finally standing up for yourself. But what if Mom's right? What if Dad really did pity me? Then he was an idiot. You gave up everything for him. That's not pitiful. That's heroic. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels like I'm destroying everything. Good. Some things need to be destroyed. The next morning, Aurora showed up with a process server. She was suing me for elder abuse and fraud. You want to play hardball? She said as the server handed me the papers. Let's play. I looked at the lawsuit, then at her smug face. Aurora, you have no idea what you just started. We'll see about that. As she walked away, I called Chelsea. They're suing me for elder abuse. Let them. I have 5 years of medical records showing the excellent care you provided, plus those recordings you mentioned. What's our next move? We countersue for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with contract. How much? Let's start with 500,000 and see how they like it. The courthouse was packed on the day of the hearing. Aurora had apparently told everyone in the family that she was finally going to expose me as the monster who'd stolen her children's inheritance. She walked in wearing a black dress like she was attending another funeral, Carl beside her in an ill fitting suit. Mom sat in the front row, arms crossed, looking like she was ready to testify that I was the devil incarnate. I sat with Chelsea at the plaintiff's table, wearing the one professional outfit I still owned from my old life. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when the judge asked if I was ready to proceed. Yes, Your Honor. Aurora's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a manipulative daughter who'd isolated her dying father and coerced him into signing documents he didn't understand. Your Honor, the defendant took advantage of Thomas Douglas during his most vulnerable moments. She cut him off from his family, controlled his medications, and used his illness to extract an unconscionable sum from his estate. Then Aurora took the stand. My father was a gentleman, she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. When he got sick, Vanessa convinced him that my mother and I didn't care about him. She turned him against us. Can you give the court an example? Her lawyer asked. She wouldn't let us visit without her permission. She monitored his phone calls. When we tried to help with his care, she said we were doing everything wrong. And what about the contract in question? Dad was heavily medicated. He was confused, scared. Vanessa told him that if he didn't sign the contract, she'd abandon him. I watched the jury's faces. A few of them looked sympathetic to Aurora's tears. Then it was Chelsea's turn. Mrs. Santiago, how often did you visit your father during his illness? As often as I could. Define as often as you could. Aurora shifted in her seat. Well, I have two small children and another on the way. It was difficult. How often? Once a week? Twice a week? Maybe once a week. For how long? Usually an hour or two. Chelsea pulled out a calendar. According to this visitor log that your father kept, you visited 37 times in 5 years. That's less than once a month. He kept a visitor log? He did. Would you like to see the entries where he wrote, Aurora came for photos again, or Aurora left when I got sick? Aurora's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Mrs. Santiago, did you ever change your father's bed sheets? That's not. Did you ever help him bathe when he was too weak to do it himself? Vanessa never asked me to. Did you ever drive him to chemotherapy treatments? I had the children. Did you ever sit with him during the night when he was in pain and couldn't sleep? Aurora was crying now, but they weren't sympathetic tears anymore. They were angry, frustrated tears. I did what I could. What you could was visit once a month for an hour while your sister gave up 5 years of her life. Then Chelsea played the recordings. Aurora's voice filled the courtroom. Dad's having a bad day. Perfect time to get him to sign. And another. Vanessa's too stupid to know what's happening. We'll have the house transferred before she figures it out. The jury's expressions changed. I could see them putting the pieces together. Mom took the stand next, trying to salvage Aurora's case. Vanessa has always been jealous of Aurora. Aurora got married, had children, built a real life. Vanessa never could. So you're saying the defendant was motivated by jealousy? Yes. She saw an opportunity to punish Aurora for being successful. Chelsea stood up for cross examination. Mrs. Douglas, who asked Vanessa to move back home to care for her father. Well, we all discussed who made the phone call asking her to quit her job and move back. Mom's jaw tightened. I did. And what did you promise her in return? Nothing specific. Chelsea pulled out a document. This is a text message you sent to Vanessa 3 years ago. Would you read it aloud? Mom took the paper reluctantly. Don't worry about the money you're spending on Dad's care. The house will be yours when this is over. It's the least we can do. Does that sound like nothing specific to you? I was just trying to comfort her. By lying to her? Objection! Sustained. But again, the jury heard what they needed to hear. The final blow came when Chelsea called Dr. Martinez, Dad's oncologist. Doctor, in your professional opinion, was Thomas Douglas mentally competent when he signed the caregiver contract? Absolutely. His cognitive function was excellent. He was very clear about his wishes and very grateful for his daughter's care. Did he ever express concerns about the contract? The opposite. He told me he felt guilty that it had taken him so long to formalize the arrangement. He said Vanessa had sacrificed everything for him and deserved to be compensated. When the doctor stepped down, Aurora's case was over. The judge deliberated for less than an hour. In the matter of Douglas estate, I find in favor of the plaintiff. The caregiver contract is valid and enforceable. The defendant's claims of elder abuse and fraud are without merit and appear to be retaliatory in nature. Aurora collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Carl put his arm around her, but he looked relieved that it was finally over. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm awarding the plaintiff an additional $50,000 in legal fees and damages for the frivolous lawsuit filed against her. Mom stood up and walked out without looking at me. Aurora had to be helped from the courtroom by Carl and her lawyer. As I gathered my papers, I heard Aurora's voice in the hallway, high and desperate. This isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll fight this until. Her voice faded as the courthouse doors closed behind them. Chelsea squeezed my shoulder. It's over, Vanessa. You won. But standing there in that empty courtroom, victory felt a lot lonelier than I'd expected. The house sold 3 weeks after the court ruling. I watched from my car as the new family moved in, a young couple with a toddler who ran around the yard like it was the most magical place on earth. They'd gotten it for 20,000 under asking price because Aurora had trashed it before she left. Broken windows, holes punched in walls, the kitchen cabinets ripped off their hinges. Her final tantrum. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hope you're happy. The kids are sleeping on air mattresses because of you. I deleted it without responding. Chelsea met me at the bank to sign the final paperwork. $362,000 after legal fees and court costs. More money than I'd ever seen in my life, and somehow it felt like nothing at all. What will you do now? She asked as we walked out. I honestly don't know. You could go anywhere, do anything. I looked back at the bank, then at the street where I'd grown up. Yeah, I could. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery. Dad's headstone was simple, just his name and dates. Someone had left flowers, wilted daisies that looked like they'd been there for weeks. Well, Dad, I did it. I kept the contract. I sat down on the grass next to his grave. Aurora's broke. Mom won't speak to me, and half the family thinks I'm a monster, but I won. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. Was it worth it? I was still sitting there when Remington found me. I figured you'd be here, she said, settling down beside me. How'd you know? Because I know you. You always come here when you need to think. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set behind the oak trees. So what now? She asked. Everyone keeps asking me that? Because we care about you. Because for the first time in 5 years, you get to choose your own life. I don't even remember what I wanted before all this started. You wanted to travel, remember? You had that whole plan to see Europe, maybe teach English abroad. I'd forgotten about that dream. It felt like something from another lifetime. You also wanted to go back to school, get your master's degree. That was before I spent 5 years out of the workforce. So, you're 34, not 94. You have time. My phone rang. Aurora's number again. I let it go to voicemail, then played it back on speaker. Vanessa, please. Carl lost his job because of all the court dates. We're behind on rent. The kids don't understand why we can't afford groceries. I'm begging you. I deleted the message. She's called 12 times today, I told Remington. What does she want? Money. She wants me to give her some of the settlement. Are you going to? I thought about it. About Aurora's kids, who didn't ask for any of this. About Carl, who'd just been trying to keep his wife happy. About the 5 years I'd lost, the promises that were broken, the family that was destroyed. No. Good. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you someone who finally learned to value herself. We drove to dinner at that little Italian place downtown where we used to go in high school. Over pasta and wine, Remington told me about her job, her boyfriend, her normal life with normal problems. I missed this, I said. Having a conversation that wasn't about medications or doctor appointments or whether someone was eating enough. You can have this every day now. Can I? I feel like I forgot how to be a regular person. You'll remember. It's like riding a bike, except the bike is your own life. On the drive home, we passed Aurora's apartment complex. I could see her car in the parking lot, the back bumper held on with duct tape. Want me to keep driving? Remington asked. No, stop here. Vanessa, just for a minute. I got out and walked to Aurora's door. I could hear the kids inside, laughing at something on TV. Normal kid sounds, happy sounds. I stood there for a long moment, my hand raised to knock. Then I turned around and walked back to the car. What was that about? Remington asked. I needed to see if I felt guilty. And do you? No. I feel sad, but not guilty. The next morning, I called a real estate agent about apartments in Portland. Then I called the university about their graduate program. Then I booked a flight to London, just because I could. As I was packing, I found the photo Dad had kept on his nightstand. The four of us at Christmas when I was 12 and Aurora was 9. We looked happy then, like a real family. I studied Mom's face in the picture, the way she was looking at Dad with genuine love. Aurora was missing her front teeth, grinning at the camera. Dad had his arms around all of us, protective and proud. I almost threw it away. Then I slipped it into my suitcase instead. Some things are worth keeping, even when they hurt. My phone rang one last time as I was loading my car. Mom's number. I answered. Vanessa. Her voice was different, smaller. Mom. I wanted to, I needed to tell you something. I waited. Your father did love you. Whatever else happened, whatever I said, he loved you very much. I know. Do you? Because I said some terrible things? You did. But I know Dad loved me. That's why he made sure I'd be okay. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry. For all of it. I know you are. Will you Can you ever forgive us? I looked at the house one last time, at the windows where I'd spent 5 years watching Dad fade away, at the door where Aurora had celebrated stealing my future. Maybe someday, but not today. I hung up and drove away, toward whatever came next. In my rearview mirror, the house got smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. And for the first time in 5 years, that felt exactly right.